That's good to know.
Can you get Miss Linda?
It's about me? Yes.
Lord have mercy, Jesus. Ain't nothing about him. I mean, it don't.
Getting the best deal necessarily. My premiums have been going up a ridiculous amount. I have friends. Not in every state. Some states are going up even higher than that. I'd say more successful than other states dealing with healthcare. And what's interesting is at the federal level, we never necessarily take what's working, look at that, and try to somehow negate. I'm not saying necessarily just continually put band-aids on it in order to fix the issue, right? Like what?
When you look at policy, which is what this is, a policy about how states support Virginia across the country, taking the full being a much better place. For because it would have covered all of the country. We're talking
here for a few minutes, and then we're going to open it up to the audience for questions. And let's just, hey, if we're in your living room right now, we're just going to be very casual and informal. State Senator Frank Wagner.
Thank you, Raynard, and it's a pleasure to be here. I wish I could tell you it was a pleasure getting here, but it wasn't. We left in more than enough time to be here by noon, and so I just want to thank you all for sticking it out and waiting on us. It started in Fredericksburg and didn't get any better all the way up. So as you might imagine, a little bit of my background. I grew up right here in Arlington. I live down in Virginia Beach now. Went to Washley High School, and right after I graduated, I went to the United States Naval Academy and went through there, majored in ocean engineering, had a degree in ocean engineering, taught scuba diving all 4 years I was at the Naval Academy, fell in love with being underwater, and the Navy managed to find me a position as a hard hat diver in the Navy. So when I went to hard hat diving school, it was, believe it or not, in the Washington Navy Yard, and where we went to school was the Anacostia River. And that's, if you can do it in the Anacostia River, you can pretty much do it anywhere around the world, which was a good training ground because I had the opportunity. I was the operations officer on a salvage ship and the diving officer. Spent most of the time in the Mediterranean, but technically I was home port at Little Creek, so we were there occasionally when we weren't doing that. The Navy then reassigned me out to Long Beach Naval Shipyard out in California. I was the Los Angeles Harbor salvage individual, plus I worked primarily on fixing ships at Long Beach Naval Shipyard, where I learned the talent of fixing ships and took what the Navy had given me and went into the private sector, worked for a year running a small shipyard, 250 employees, so you gotta understand a shipyard business To be small is 100 people, to be big is 10,000 people. So it was a shipyard. The owners of the shipyard sold the property to the city of Newport News. So I laid off 250 people, and then I laid myself off. So when I got done, I said, wait a minute, the last 100 people I laid off were some of the finest people I've ever seen. So I went across, started my own ship repair company, and managed to hire many of those folks back again, built it up to well over 100 people. Sold the business in 1989, and when I sold it, I had a non-compete for a period of 4 years on me, where I couldn't get back into business. Was very concerned, and obviously you are too. You wouldn't be here today if you weren't concerned about the political issues. I thought, well, I have time, I have motive, I have opportunity. Why don't I go ahead and run for office? And that was in 1991. I won a House of Delegates seat in the city of Virginia Beach, and I've had the honor and privilege of serving the citizens of Virginia Beach now for 25 years. After the non-compete came off, I was doing some consulting work in the industry, and was talking to the owner of a smaller shipyard, and he said, do you want to buy this place? I'm like, hadn't thought about that, but let me look at your books, let me look at a few things. He had about 25 employees. So I bought the place, built it up to 140 employees, and sold that business about 2 years ago. So while I was, as a legislature in Virginia, you're a citizen legislator, so you have to have another job, trust me. When you look at the paycheck a legislator gets, you know you have to have another job. So I worked those concurrently. I sold that business 2 years ago, and thought, once again, I found myself with time, opportunity, and motive, and problems throughout the Commonwealth that need to be addressed, and I think I'm in the best position to address those problems. Now, I am a Republican. I'm a Republican candidate for governor. I've taken a different tact. I didn't take a different tact. I chose the tact I took as I ran for office, looking at the issues that confront Virginia over and over again that I see. My experiences in business, drawn with my experiences in government, had led me to several positions. One, first and foremost, I think everybody's mind is jobs and economy. It polls out as a #1 issue, but I think you hear it over and over again, jobs and economy, jobs and economy. Well, and I can include Democrats in this. When you look at all the candidates, I'm the only one that's been a true businessman. And by true businessman, I mean I've worn a hard hat all my life in shipyards. I've hired some people that I've worked around people that are pipe fitters, welders, ship fitters, machinists, painters, sandblasters, people that do what I can't do. And you say, well, wait a minute, you can paint, not like you paint in an industrial application. Assure you, I cannot do what they do. And I've developed the deepest respect and admiration for the people I've worked around. I've also noticed something else. They're getting older and older. And we're not getting young people involved in working with their hands. I tell you this because it leads to my issues that I'm going to talk about. Secondly, speaks for itself. Here we are, Saturday, Easter. I would have thought driving up here would have been relatively easy, yet it's not. And this is not even a work day. In Washington, D.C., and I'm not telling anything anybody in this room doesn't already know, because we're all up here in Northern Virginia, traffic has gotten out of control. I can assure you, having on the Finance Committee, I chair the Transportation Subcommittee of the Finance Committee. We are using every dollar that we've collected as the priorities around the Commonwealth of Virginia, but quite frankly, it's just not enough. So, if we're going to grow the economy of Virginia and we're going to diversify the economy of Virginia, and we have a transportation system that is inadequate for the economy today, how are we going to achieve that without making a big investment in transportation? Both in public transportation as well as in private transportation, or roads, highways, and mass transit. It's got to happen. We've about built every road you can do in Northern Virginia, and we have a metro system that's in jeopardy. Right now, we have a Virginia Rail Express system that has needs today on the existing line, and I can assure you right now, today, decisions are being made to pull back any money to look at running those routes other places, simply because there's not enough money to maintain and operate the system they have right now. That's the kind of crisis that transportation is in Virginia, and it has to be addressed if we expect to grow and diversify the economy. Secondly, we put in SOLs and SOQs that are wonderful if you want to go to college. And we've done it at the expense of career technical education. And everywhere I go, every business I talk to around the Commonwealth of Virginia, I hear the same thing. I cannot find skilled people to fill the jobs. I could grow my business. I could double the size of my business. It doesn't matter what skin color the business owner is or anything else. It's the same message over and over again. And I work closely with a very large electrical installer contractor down in Newport News. He's a dear friend of mine. He happens to be African American, but he cannot find the electricians to do the work he needs done. It is a problem consistently. It's also unfair to students that may not want to go to college and may not look at those things or may have difficulties in some of the coursework. That we've done away with career technical education and those opportunities. And I'll tell you a couple of secrets. First of all, those with a good career technical background make more money than a college graduate does today. His opportunities are bigger, he or she, I'm sorry, opportunities are greater because there's just so much more jobs available. And I know literally dozens off the top of my head that I know personally, what I would refer to as blue-collar millionaires. People who never went to college, but they made a lot of money because they got tired of working for somebody and they started their own business. And they grew that business and they continue to grow to this day. And so those opportunities are out there, but we've got to make parents and students aware of these opportunities as early as 6th grade. And we have to make sure that the facilities, training, and instructors are in place to fill that need. And so that's the other. And the third problem is that government itself, in my mind, should be a partner. Now look, it has a regulatory responsibility and it has to ensure that the playing field's level. But beyond that, over the last, and believe me, having been in business, and I tell folks, if you ever want to buy a regulated business, buy yourself a shipyard. You'll meet the entire alphabet soup of agencies that come in. And the attitude of those people that come in over the last 15, 20 years that I've done it, I've watched it degenerate, where almost government seems to be an adversary to business and doesn't want to be a partner with business to help business grow, because ultimately those are the issues that a good, vibrant private sector provides the additional revenue that the government needs to operate, and also decreases, hopefully, the needs on the social side of the equation to less people on demand on the social side only increases that and allows the government to do even more on behalf of the citizens. So with that, that's pretty much probably blew right through my 3 or 5 minutes. And again, thank you all for hanging tough. I apologize. Who would have thought on a Saturday on Easter weekend that the traffic would be like it was, but trust me, it is. And for those, understanding maybe some people here from Prince William, you probably felt a little bit of my pain coming up here, but you need to go further south. It starts a lot further south. So thank you all very, very much. And at this point, I guess we'll do a panel discussion and then, all right?
Exactly. Thank you, Senator Wagner. And the mere fact that you trudged it out in the traffic shows your commitment to why we're here. And this senator is the only one of the guys running for governor that's even addressing the minority community. So you take that however you want to take it. And what we want to do now, I'm going to start off by asking a question, then Aaron and Ken, I'm going to go to you guys, and before you get to your question, just give the senator a brief blurb about who you are and what you're doing, just so he has an understanding. And then we're going to open it up to the audience, because us pontificating is not why we're here. We want to hear, and the senator, more importantly, wants to hear from you guys. Senator, the question I have for you is, should you become governor, what does diversity look like for your administration, not only as far as staffing, but as you and I talked several times before, most entrepreneurs and small business owners, the problem they have is not their core competencies and their ability to do what they're in business to do. They're good at that. Access to capital is a major problem, and then breaking into the good old boy network. And I often tell my friends, I don't have a problem with the good old boy network, as long as I'm part of it. That's the problem. So how can you help crack those few issues relative to the small and minority business community?
Let me just say this, that you're absolutely right. There are many qualified people out there that do work day in and day out. And I've had minority subcontracting in my shipyards at all times. And not only was it a government requirement, but it was the best person, the most competent people, and the most, quite frankly, lowest price they gave me into my shipyard. So many of those things are price driven. So how do you break down the barriers? How do you network, if you will? How do you become part of the business community when you feel like you may somehow be excluded? And I would say that networking and building up friendships are irreplaceable. So many times I hear when you go to look for jobs, it's not what you know, but who you know necessarily. And it works across the board. And the more we break down barriers, perceived barriers between the races, the better off that we're all going to be in terms of working alongside each other and getting to know everybody better. And that's a difficult problem. It just seems like somehow, you know, we're not mixing like we should, quite frankly. And I will go in this rainer that well over half the people that work with me in the shipyard were African American. It was a location of my shipyard. It was quite frankly where the tradesmen were. My head of human relations she was African American. The person that I entrusted the most, that's the person that actually physically pulled the vessels out of the water and put them on blocks and put them back in. He was African American and a hard worker. Not only did he do that all day long, but he had his own business in the evening all day long. And then he came in with my office with inventions and how do we get this thing going and what can we do here? And I'd steer him on those directions. Half of my shop superintendents and distinct trades in the shipyard were African American. And it was a very diverse, and as I told folks, I said, this shipyard exists to repair ships and make money. Because if we do not make money, then we lose money. If we lose money, then everybody's out of a job. And that's not the way you run a business. In terms of that, we have several programs at the state level that do open up opportunities to minorities and small businessmen. It even extends down to within subcontracting. I think the programs are working. I think half of the problem with trying to get started is the knowledge of where those programs are to assist you. How do you find those people? How do you get involved and do those things? So I think that a lot of the problem is just information and getting the word out to the general public as a whole, that these opportunities are available and here's how you go to get them. Unfortunately, any time, and trust me, I've been down this road many, many times as a small businessman, it is extremely difficult. I could care less what your skin color is to get a business started. The amount of paperwork, the amount of documentation, the things that you have to do to get a business started are extremely difficult. And it's a burden for anyone that tries to get into business, and the amount of business licenses and things, hurdles that you have to jump to be able to do that is certainly way too hard. So an area that we can do, regardless of what your race is, to break those one-stop shop, places where you can go and get all the information you need, all the facts that you need, all the opportunities for whatever field it is you decide you want to open up your company to, and do that. I think secondly, and there's associations, being involved in the Chamber of Commerce, being involved in where other business owners are, regardless of your skin color, is important. We can look at that, and we can look at some of the racial barriers, but somebody who isolates himself from that business that he's getting into, regardless of what color you are, is going to have problems. It's just going to be problems, and those are unacceptable. You have to get involved in particularly in the trade area that you're interested in. And for instance, if you're interested in installing solar work, then you ought to go to these solar meetings that they have. You ought to be involved in that. You ought to talk to business people. The first thing, the hardest one to do is everyone will ask you, regardless of your skin color, well, what other jobs have you done? What other things have you done for me? And when you're first starting, of course, your only answer is none. So many businesses are started by, let's pick plumbing, okay? A plumber works for a plumbing company, and there's 8 or 9 people on his list that say, I only want this plumber coming to my house, and I only want this. Well, all of a sudden it starts dawning on that plumber, hey, wait a minute, they don't need this company, they need me. And all of a sudden you start your business with 8 or 9 confirmed clients, and you can move on. So it's difficult to break it down. There are opportunities there. Sometimes I think it's just a lack of knowledge. Now, in terms of financing, I can tell you this, it is extremely difficult, regardless of what your skin color is, to get financing. Some of the new banking laws that were passed make it extremely difficult to anyone to get it. And when I bought that second yard that I told you about, I went to the bank for a loan. And the bank said, sure, we'll loan you that, but you have to take 130%. In other words, 130% of the value of the loan of your own assets and put it over here where it can't be touched. So if something happens to you here, then we know we have our money over here. And it took me a week of negotiation with the bank to say, but first, if something happens to the shipyard, you're gonna auction off everything in the shipyard first before you come after my personal assets. Well, if someone has no personal assets, I can give a darn what your skin color is. You're not gonna be able to get access to that capital. And it's a huge problem. Now, the SBA has some loan guarantee programs at the federal level that offer that opportunity. And having gone down that road for loan guarantees, I can tell you that paperwork burden in and of itself is a nightmare in and of itself. And you know, again, go back to that one-stop shop to assist an entrepreneur in trying to get the capital together. And think about it, you're a plumber, you're working for a plumbing company, you have 10 people that absolutely love you, guarantees your business, they'll tell their neighbors, and now you start to build up the business. But you still have to get a truck, you still have to get a business license, you still have to get all your tools and equipment. You still have to get all of those resources together before you can start your company. If you don't have that money, you're really stuck. You have a job, but you're stuck in that particular position. And these are barriers that impact everybody, and they impact everybody regardless. But I will tell you this, and I'll include the Democrats as part of the picture. I'm the only candidate out there that's actually walked this walk, that knows what I'm talking about, that's experienced it, that understands the obstacles, and knows what it would take to break down the situations to no open about. So with that, I hope that explains the question. So.
Senator, thank you for coming out and joining us. Thank you for coming out and joining us this afternoon. We appreciate you taking the time. As Raynard mentioned, my name is Aaron Nago, and I've been involved in Republican Party politics for almost the better part of 30 years. First starting out with Republican strategist Lee Atwater while I was in college, traveling the country, working with Lee, going back to New York, running for office myself, serving 2 terms in the district assembly, 70th Assembly District in New York, winning first in the special election and a successive 2-year term after, stints at the RNC, and pretty much worked every Republican presidential campaign from in the early stages, coffee getter, chauffeur, to senior policy advisor, senior advisor, and deputy campaign manager successively in the last several Republican presidential campaigns. And so I do appreciate and understand the Herculean effort that it takes to run for office. And so again, applaud you for being here to address these issues with us this afternoon. But having said that, and giving you a little background on these myself, I want to jump right into it with you, if you don't mind. And as we were talking about shipbuilding and using that as kind of the backdrop, a metaphor that we hear quite often is that a rising tide lifts all boats. And during the last debate down at Liberty University, candidate Gillespie mentioned that Virginia is in the bottom 10 U.S. states for economic growth. If this is actually the case, then minorities are most likely facing the compounded impact of a sluggish economy. Can you please share with us this afternoon what is your plan to address economic growth for Virginia?
And again, I touched on a few of these during my introductory remarks, but let me be a little bit clearer. I look around the state and to say there's one solution for one area is very difficult because Virginia is a very diverse state with very different needs. But here's what I see. One of the areas that we've been really took a hit on is manufacturing. We have seen manufacturing jobs leave left and right, and the state is population of those involved in manufacturing. Why do I key on manufacturing? First of all, jobs in the manufacturing industry pay a lot more than most jobs do. Secondly, when you have a manufacturer, then parts suppliers come, and it increases economic activity around that manufacturing plant. Now, for instance, we have in Virginia Beach, if you're familiar with chainsaws and leaf blowers, steel, the nice orange ones that you see. Virginia Beach was able to attract them some 30 years ago with a small manufacturing plant. They now employ over 4,000 people in the city of Virginia Beach. And there's 2 other vendors that provide parts for their chainsaws and leaf blowers that have now set up manufacturing operations right in the city of Virginia Beach to be able to send those parts across the street to be able to continue the production line. Just one small example of why attracting manufacturing is so important. Why, with our port, a huge port down in Hampton Roads, and I'm going to go Hampton Roads centric for a little bit, and then I'm going to talk about Northern Virginia a little bit. Why is that so important? Well, the access is a global market, and 98% of all freight globally moves by ship, not by aircraft. So access to a port is instrumental if you want to participate in the global economy. It's certainly, the Port of Virginia has opened up opportunities in warehousing right now, but we haven't been able to convert that to manufacturing per se as much of an opportunity as we should have. North Carolina is proposing an interstate highway system parallel to Route 58. Route 58 runs from the Port of Hampton Roads, and it's an old state highway that runs all the way out to Danville and beyond. Technically, if you go through the mountains, it goes all the way and continues out to Bristol, Virginia. North Carolina is proposing an interstate highway system 20 miles on the other side of the border, parallel, and then come up through the city of Chesapeake, which ties right into the Port of Virginia. Now, why are they proposing that highway? Because they want access to the port. Where do you think all the economic activity and building will be? It'll be along that interstate highway system in North Carolina and not in Virginia. We don't have the money in the transportation budget to turn 58 into a limited access. It should be I-58. You come up here to Northern Virginia now, and particularly those, the big business people and the GS 14s and 15s, 18s, and those SCSs and those people up here in DC and the people in the high tech, they have the resources to get back and forth to work, but the people of lesser means in this area need to rely on mass transit. Let me give you the situation on mass transit. If you expect your economy to grow and opportunities to increase and more people to come to this area, you've got to fix transportation. Here's the reality of what's going on today. Any new lane that's being proposed up here comes with tolls. That's just what this administration's coming in at. I hate tolls, and let me tell you why. First of all, by saying I have to put up a toll is saying I'm going to go out and borrow money that should have been raised to build a highway, and I'm going to take $2 out of your pocket to build $1 worth of road. The first $1 is going to be to build that highway, and the second $1 is going to go to Wall Street to pay for the bonds because we weren't willing to pay for that road to begin with up front. And I never, ever want to take $2 out of the taxpayer's pocket to get $1 worth of something done here in Virginia. To me, that's bad business, terrible business, and yet that's what's going on. So, and then I watch, and I think most of you in this room are far more familiar than I am because you either ride the Metro or have read the papers and know what's going on with the Metro system. There is no money. Once we fix the agreements and can get things on, there's no money in our budget to do what needs to be done on Metro. Then we can go to the Virginia Rail Express, which, had I known the traffic, when I got to Fredericksburg, I would have seen if there was a train, I'd have been here a lot faster. There is no money to plan any more extensions. They're withdrawing all the money just to try to maintain the existing rail lines that they have. There's no money to build sidings to store the cars to get them off the rails so they don't block the rest of CSX track when they're not being utilized during rush hour. There's no money to build any of that. That system, not to even begin to mention the Long Bridge, which is the new parallel to 14th Street Bridge, Long Bridge into DC that allowed to move so much smoothly. So you can begin to see the problems that lack of transportation funding has in terms of building the jobs and economy. And once again, I'm the only candidate that's talking about increasing funding for transportation. And let me give you some realities, and for those of you who have your cell phone and get a little bored hearing me, I'd love for you to go to GasBuddy.com. Okay, and GasBuddy.com, what that does is tell you how much you pay for a gallon of gas at Costco in Charlotte, North Carolina, and how much you pay for a gallon of gas here in Fairfax County. you'd be shocked. Okay? And if you're in Charlotte, it's $2.09 a gallon. I know because I had plenty of time while Derek drove me up here today to not only get my paperwork done, but then to play on Gas Buddy because I knew I was coming up to talk to you. $2.09 in Fairfax County at the Costco, it's $2.25. Think about that for a minute. Big cities, same reformulated gas, same requirements, okay? It's more expensive, yet North Carolina's gas taxes are twice as much as Virginia's. Twice as much. The retail price of gasoline is 8, 9, 14, 15 cents a gallon less than it is in Virginia, but North Carolina's gas taxes are twice as much, which tells you the retailers and wholesalers are doing great in Virginia, right? But we're not getting any money for our roads. And that's a reality. You can go to Gas Buddy and look at it, and it's more than, the gas tax per gallon is more than twice in North Carolina than what it is in Virginia. We have to go that extra effort. And for those that say, oh, my gas prices will go up, I don't think so. You know, I think the market will charge what they can get away with. And you know it and I know it. If you get off on an interstate highway system, you're going to pay 15 cents a gallon more than if you drive 5 miles into town and go to that gas station. That's just the reality of what retailers do. They'll charge you what they think they can get away with. And that's capitalism. That's how it works. And you know, but the understanding of that is right now, we're not getting the revenues in we need to do any of those things that's going to allow us to grow our economy and diversify our economy. So that's mission 1. 2, what did I just tell you? A rising tide lifts all boats if the boat has a bottom and a keel and a motor. In other words, as the jobs are created, we have to have a skilled workforce to fill those jobs, which goes back to what I said in my opening statement. What have we done to career technical education? And I told you I went to high school right over here in Washington Lee High School. I went to Stratford Junior High, which is still on Lee Highway. It's not a junior high any longer, but it's still there. I remember when I first got to Stratford, I remember my shop class in 7th grade. Now I lived in Fairfax in 8th grade, and when I went out to Lanier Intermediate out in Fairfax County, I had shop again, woodworking, and they had a foundry, and we actually poured melted aluminum into molds that we had made, and we actually cast things. And then in 9th grade, I was back in Arlington again, and I had electronics class. And what those 3 courses did was build my fascination for technical things. There is nothing in our schools to build a student's fascination for technical skills. And now, you know, I could do math pretty good, and so that follows the technical skills lead to an engineering degree. But those technical skills, so many of my best friend in high school, not so good in math, you know, not so good, but he could take bicycles back then that had high handlebars, and he'd take parts off of bicycles and build this thing. He was obviously very mechanically inclined. Long story short, he owns a huge air conditioning company up here in Northern Virginia, okay, fixing air conditioners. It's not a dead end, it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity, and there's so many jobs out there available. So the tide can rise, but if there's nobody with the skill sets to capture the rising tide, we're not going to do it. And so that builds the economy. That fills the jobs that are available today and starts to create the jobs that are available tomorrow. And then, as we mentioned it with Raynard's question in terms of opening up opportunities to minority businesses, opening up opportunities to business as a whole. And a more vibrant economy does that. If I were to have an economy, it creates more opportunities for not just minority businesses, but all businesses. A shrinking economy tends to exclude minorities even more because you kind of stick with who you got, even though who you got is getting less and less work from you because it's a shrinking economy. And so a more vibrant economy is just going to create opportunities. And I will tell you from someone who has run a shipyard where I've gotten a requirement, something new, or a person I used to rely on went out of business or whatever, or the price they came in was so high that it didn't work into the job I was working on for the government or a commercial customer. You know, we opened up those opportunities and we looked at everybody. You know, we said, let's go outside of our comfort zone and let's take a chance on new companies regardless of who owned them or who did what. But I can tell you, as your business grows, you have to reach out and find new people as opposed to your existing supply base will stay with you. Once again, I'm the only candidate, and I'm amazed right here that Ed Gillespie lives 5 miles away, right down here in Mount Vernon. I've heard his wife many times say, I pass Mount Vernon every day during her her canned political speech. And Corey Stewart lives in Prince William County, yet neither one of them could manage to get here. And I drove up from Virginia Beach today and managed to get here. But I think it's a great opportunity. But I hope that addresses your question.
Follow up.
Sure.
Governor. Excuse me.
But I say one step at a time.
So you were quoted most recently as saying that your two opponents are both too experienced to lead the state of Virginia. Well, we know that all experience is not good experience. What legislative accomplishments can you share with us this afternoon that would suggest you'd be sensitive or champion issues that were paramount or that impact the minority community, particularly from the area of economic growth and stability?
Well, first of all, I think that the exact quote was, they don't have any experience and I'm the one with experience. So if you want a governor able to hit the ground running, I'm going to be that guy because I understand what things are going on. First, let me look at what we try to do and what being able to cap electric rates. 3 or 4 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I passed legislation that said, okay, we're going to cap electric rates. Okay, and why is that important? I wish I had the power and the authority to cap healthcare rates so that we could, at least have something stable, because those things keep going up and up and up and up. But we did, and your rates are some of the lowest, or they're the lowest in the Mid-Atlantic. They have actually come down from the time my bill was passed because fuel prices have dropped somewhat, and that impacts everybody regardless, but quite frankly, it shakes out on those with less means more than anybody. Those that are living paycheck to paycheck cannot afford to see a big jump in their electric bill. That means food, something other vital thing that's required in the family is not going to be there because that money was diverted to a cost like your electric bill, and everybody needs electricity. So I think those kind of things, ensuring that we do everything we can to make sure that Virginia is competitive as possible. And obviously with electric rates, that extends into every business, which every business uses electricity and those types of things. I did author that legislation, yes I did. And it's going to be capped. It's been capped for 2 years, it'll be capped for another 3 years before we open that up. But it was a tough negotiation, and we were able to do those kinds of things. I think some of the other things are more aligned in the budget, more so than perhaps legislation in and of itself, is ensuring that our safety net programs are properly funded. They may not be fully funded. There's just not enough money to fix things, and we're not Washington, D.C. We can't go out and borrow money or print money. We have to live within our means, and we have a budget that forces us to make tough decisions. And this year we had to cut $1.2 billion out of the budget to balance the books. Now, we had projected revenues coming in at a rate that didn't keep pace, which goes back to what you were saying, Aaron, earlier, that economic growth in the state has been stagnant, and we haven't seen the growth that's been experienced in some of the other states. So I think those kinds of things. As far as I know, everything I've tried to do with transportation funding cuts across every race. I certainly saw that I saw driving up here. It didn't. Skin color doesn't enter into those types of things. So I think those particular issues that stand out in my mind is some of the things that we try to do across the board. I think on a more personal note, my wife has worked. She was the executive director of Habitat for Humanity on the peninsula. Just a wonderful program to help folks that get their first house, buy their first house. So what a wonderful, wonderful thing that is. I think some of the public-private partnerships, I think some of the issues of school choice come to mind as some of the problems of giving parents the opportunity to, now these haven't been unsuccessful to this point, but it's something that I feel strongly about. If you feel like your child's in a school that's not performing, it gives that parent the opportunity to send their child to another school that they would consider performing in the better interest of their child. So I think that's school choice. I think charter schools having that opportunity to open up more charter schools to give alternatives to the existing education program. If the parents and the student don't feel comfortable in the existing programs, I think offers more opportunities of issues that cut across racial boundaries, but certainly open up our school system, because the driving underlying force for the success of any individual, regardless of skin color, is going to be education. Without an education, you're already starting 2 steps behind. And I think we need to continue to ensure, and we held harmless this year despite cutting $1.2 billion, our education budget. And I think that's imperative, because we have to make a significant investment at the state level to ensure that all corners of the Commonwealth have a solid education system. But I think it's time we need to look at the education system and start to retool it to ensure that the students and parents are at least aware of the opportunities and have the resources, the schools have the resources to help students that may want to pursue a career in technical education, just because there's so many opportunities.
Could you allocate state resources towards vocational education skills and voucher programs for choice?
Yes, I think absolutely that's an opportunity to do, and I would also, and I have in the past. The one thing that I have that, other than perhaps Senator Northam, who's Lieutenant Governor Northam now, he's my next door neighbor. He represented the Senate district right next to mine in the Hampton Roads area. We're the only ones with track records to actually show what we've done and proven what we've done. The rest of them just say, this is what we want to do, this is what we're, and I've seen too many governors come and go, regardless of political party, make promises and then once elected don't follow up on their promises. So when you hear me say something like I've supported it, you can go back and see a voting record where I have supported it and will support it as your governor. Those I think are important distinctions, but certainly career tech schools would be an excellent potential for vocational education. The parent may say, look, this is a great opportunity, and do that. I think some of the areas we need to look at in our school systems is ensuring that our schools are safe, ensuring that education is going on in our schools, and that children and parents can send their children to school knowing they'll be safe and knowing they'll return safe. And I think that's an increasing concern amongst a lot of parents that send their kids to public schools. And I am a product of public schools, and I'm here to tell you that you can get a great education in a public school. But so much is up to the student and the parent, along with the school system, about doing that. And so I think that's an important takeaway from that. But making sure that these students graduate that go through and get the education they're going to need to perform in this economy. If they don't, for whatever reason, then we've got problems on down the road, the problems that will languish with that particular individual into adulthood, and we see that every day, and we try to address those problems with the resources we have, but far better to fix it when it can be fixed, and that's at a young age with a good education.
Ken is going to ask 2 questions, and then I'm going to come down on the floor and take questions from the audience that you can address to the senators. And then at 1:50, we're going to end there and have the senator do his closing remarks. And after we conclude, if you all have personal questions you want to ask the senator, he'll be here for a few minutes after the program and come down there, and you all can ask questions. So Ken to get 2 questions, and then I'll come down to the floor and use Ken's mic, and so start thinking about whatever questions you have for the senator.
I noticed that you chose to use my mic, thus I don't have an opportunity to speak again. Fortunately. Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. First, it's an honor to have you present at this particular event, and for reaching out to a constituency that most GOPers don't feel the need to do so. I wanted to ask, and follow up to questions regarding economic development. You have to the south, North Carolina, who has a tax rate that has fallen down to 3% for businesses, and is adjusted downward, even more so as they become more successful. Thus, they have a greater economic stabilization rate than the state or the Commonwealth of Virginia. I want to ask you in that regard, you speak about infrastructure improvements. does that mean that Virginians will be looking at a higher tax rate? And then secondly, how can you be more effective in creating economic diversity here when North Carolina seems to be the vanguard in that particular regard?
Well, let me just say this. First of all, the revenues that I talked about was in the fuel tax rates. And while I understand the corporate tax, one needs to look at the total tax package on a business in North Carolina vis-a-vis Virginia, and look at the property tax rates that they're paying in North Carolina, which can be very exorbitant, and depending on the locality and also the state taxes that are applied to it. So to look at a single tax item without looking at the entire tax burden on a business would be unfair at this point. We, as a state, do not tax machinery and tools. We leave that up to localities to decide whether or not they want to tax machinery and tools. We, as a state, do not tax business professional occupational licenses, although we do charge for business, certain certificates and contractor's license, those types of things. But we don't as a whole. Look, no one likes to pay taxes, believe me, and myself. But in my business decision, I didn't make a business decision because of the tax rate. That is part of the equation, but it's a small part of the equation. If you look at electric rates, if you look at the total package, but if I can't get back and forth to work, if I can't do that, if I can't get access to broadband, if I can't do the things that I have to do for my business, then I'm not going to consider your areas of business. And let me give you a for instance. If you're trying to bring the big fish in, or have the big fish grow, we only have one site, 200 acres in the entire Commonwealth of Virginia, what I would call site ready to go, ready for somebody to come in, put up a building and plug in and everything's there. Compare that to North Carolina, multiple sites, 1,000-acre, small, with all the utilities, everything right there, just waiting for someone to come and plug in. Same thing in South Carolina, multiple facilities ready to plug in. We just have one, 200 acres, and that's ridiculous. No company is going to say, I want to put up a facility here. Gee, I hope I can get the permits, to run with utilities here. I hope I can get the right of way to bring in what I need. Nobody's going to come here. They're not going to take those kind of chances. That's the kind of forward-looking and forward-thinking that we're not doing in Virginia, that we should be doing in Virginia. That's to bring the big outside people in. The second thing is, why don't you expand here? Now, I'm going to tell you something. The businesses I talk to, and I talk to him, he happens to be Hispanic, out in Ashburn, Virginia. He's the one who provides all the plate glass that hangs outside of windows, so these high rises and these office buildings. He and I had a meeting, and he said, just with my existing customers, I could double my employment if I could just find qualified people. So it goes back to those situations. It's every person I talk to. Go out and talk to any businessman and say, why can't I grow? And it's not my tax rates are too high or this. It's not that. It's I cannot find qualified people. Now, it would be great to talk about an income tax cut. But let me give you the reality, and this is what the budget of Virginia is right now, and the situation that Virginia's in. I would love an income tax cut, and I would love that. And I think everybody would like to pay less taxes. There's no question about that. We just cut $1.2 billion out of the budget. Some of that was by deferring things that should have been done, deferring it, pushing it out, like pretending that it have to be done, making it go away. We have a retirement system that has $78 billion in the fund, and it's supposed to be $19 billion, even higher. That's how actuarially out of balance. If we don't want that to come back and haunt our state employees who are counting on that retirement fund to be there, we can't continue to ignore it. Now, we've addressed it. We've put some things into place that we hope actuarially will bring it into balance, but the jury is still way too far out on that. We have a rainy day fund that's supposed to be for a recession. Currently, as authorized, it can be as high as $2.4 billion. Typically, it's over $1 billion, and we draw on that when you go into a recession, so you don't have to cut those safety net programs, and you don't have to cut those programs, so you can draw down on the rainy day fund. We haven't been in recession in 9 years now, yet we've drawn down to that to less than $300 million. That's the reality of the finances in Virginia. Now, what Ed Gillespie has proposed is an income tax cut, which is for people making more than $200,000, will put $1,000 back into their pocket. You know, that's the reality. For somebody making $20,000, will put $100 back into their pocket. And look, that $100 would be nice. It would be very, very, important. I understand that. But to think that that's going to create, as he says, 50,000 jobs, I don't buy into that. I just don't see where, a person making 200,000 might, spend 2 more days on vacation. But I don't see it, that kind of return on investment is going to make a difference in that. When you look at the total tax burden between business in North Carolina and business in Virginia, it's identical. It's very, very close when you take into account all the property taxes and that kind of thing. So ask yourself, what are they doing? But I've gone back to the transportation thing. We have got to be competitive, and we have got to be able to build the infrastructure out, or we're going to choke this economy down, just the opposite. One of the other things that disturbs me too is the fact that college costs, access to college for those going to college, and college is a big part of the economy also. I don't mean to diminish college, but college has gotten so expensive and so out of control. And you know what? In my family, I have to live in my budget. In the Commonwealth of Virginia, we have to live in our budget. Businesses have to live in their budget, yet somehow our universities don't have to live in a budget. They can raise tuition, raise tuition, raise tuition. I could, and I'm 61 years old, grew up, and I know because I applied to Virginia Tech and UVA, I could make enough during the summer to pay my college tuition for the year. You could make enough in the summer to do that. It's not that way anymore, unless you can find a summer job that's going to pay you $40,000, $50,000 to work for the summer. Unless that job's available, you can't make enough in the summer to pay for that. And we have too many students out there graduating from college with $40,000, $50,000 in student loans. And if they can find a job, if they can't find a job, those loans become non-performing and impacts their credit rating for the rest of their lives until they pay off that debt. And it's dragging down this economy. All we have to do is tell our universities, no more tuition increases. Live within your means, and they'll figure it out. They're very bright people, and they can do that, and we can do that. It's not going to harm UVA or Virginia Tech. We've done it. We did it in the 1990s, and then we reduced it by 25%. They still top universities anywhere in the country, and I maintain to you that it will, but we've got to be sensitive to that from the consumer side of it. So.
Final question.
Sure.
In terms of Governor Terry McAuliffe in 2013 led the Commonwealth in expanding Medicaid, adding $21 billion of federal funds. However, Donald Trump, the 45th President of the United States, made comments earlier last week that even if we don't do anything with Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, by the fall it will perish. I want your thoughts in terms of whether you were in approval of the expansion of Medicaid here in the Commonwealth, and what will you propose to do should ACA perish in the fall?
Let me just say a couple of things. First of all, I'm on record as not supporting Medicaid expansion, and let me tell you why. It was a difficult decision, but Medicaid cost from the state budget used to be 8% of the budget. It's now 22, 23%. Despite what I tell you, call it cutting $1.2 billion out of the budget, we still expanded the expenditures in the Medicaid. And because it's a fixed cost, those that qualify under existing, to add another 400,000 people onto it and try to accommodate those costs would have been unworkable. We really would have cut into K through 12 education and the rest of the programs in order to cover those costs. So we just couldn't, we were in a position to be able to afford those kinds of things that we're talking about. Having said that, I think the entire, and despite what everybody says, based on the read that I have, there will be a bill before the end of the year addressing Medicaid and addressing the Affordable Care Act as a whole. The way that I understand it is Medicaid will be block granted. And block granted, hopefully without any strings attached, because so many of the things that we do in Medicaid are dictated to us by folks right across the river here in how we can administer the program. The very way that they do that sets up a massive waste of money where we could provide so much better care to those that are served by Medicaid and probably add a lot more folks to it if you just let it run it Virginia's way. And let me give you some examples of what I'm talking about. First of all, Medicaid recipients, and let's be realistic about the Medicaid population. It's the elderly that use up the vast majority of the funds in Medicaid. It's not necessarily the poor. It's not the poor. It's not the people of low means. It is the elderly population. And that is not racially split anyway at all. It is the elderly, and that makes sense. As you get older, you tend to draw down on those benefits. And so, you know, some by hook and crook make themselves eligible to do that, and we've tried to clamp down on that. And that, by you say by hook and crook, what are you talking about? An elderly person that gets rid of all their assets to their children, even though they have sufficient money to pay. Why do they do that? So they don't have any assets, so they're not eligible for Medicaid. Now, we've tried to tie up that loophole to the extent the federal government will let us do that. But because we know where general populations of Medicaid recipients are, let me tell you a program that does work. Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock, 20,000 employees, Newport News, centrally located. Rather than go out and buy conventional health insurance and have you go to your doctor, get reimbursed and all of that, they set up a clinic right outside the gate. And they have their own doctors, they have their own nurses, they have their own pharmacy. Everything's right there in one location. There's no paperwork. There's no, if you knew the kinds of costs that are wasted and nothing that has to do with anybody's health, but has everything to do with paperwork and billing and processes. Talk to your doctor when you talk to him, and he'll tell you that probably well over half his time is spent not practicing medicine, but doing paperwork. It's ridiculous what we've gotten ourselves into. They do that because there is no paperwork, and 90%, and it's open to the families too. The families use it also. Most of their healthcare costs are covered. Most of the healthcare needs are covered by that. And then there's going to be the open heart surgeries and the things that require hospitalization. They carry a policy to cover those procedures and those things that require not able to happen in the clinic. Well, you know where elderly Medicaid patients are centrally located. I mean, you know, they typically are in relatively manageable areas where this clinic setup would be. You'd have a better quality service for that elderly patient. You'd have a better quality, you know, no paperwork. The doctor would be able to practice medicine, and that concept would work. Typically, a lot of Medicaid populations in the poor communities also follow that same pattern. No need to have to go miles to get to somewhere, to wait, to have to go to this procedure, to sit in a waiting room when you can go right down the street and do that. We can open up that for a large population, and heck, we could probably even offer for those in means an opportunity to buy into a policy, you know, to be able to utilize that facility also. So, I mean, those are just some of the opportunities that we have seen work in the private sector. And the thing I learned in business, if you see something that doesn't work, get rid of it. If you see something that works, replicate it and make it grow. Well, you're watching it work, and my belief is it'll work in the private sector too. You contract out with a private firm, let them operate one of these, no paperwork, no fuss, no muss, and watch to see if you don't get better results, just like Newport News Shipbuilding has. So I think, you know, it's with angst, I look at it, because healthcare impacts everybody. It's with angst, but it's also with the optimism that if you truly send it down to the Commonwealth of Virginia with no strings attached, I think with the money you're giving us and the money that we put in, that we can open up and include more people of means and be able to provide a better service for the customer, because ultimately the customer is the Medicaid recipient himself. And he or she, that's the customer, and the customer can realize a much better service, and you know, we can cut out a lot of these overhead costs. I'll give you an example. One example before I open it up, or Raynard opens it up for questions from everybody. There's a member of the House of Delegates, he's a pharmacist, and he had a little surgery done. Now he's on the state health insurance policy. Okay, he had a little surgery done on his foot, right? Well, after it was done, the podiatrist gave him a prescription. and says you need to take this medication. So what does the pharmacist do? He goes back and he fills his own prescription, and he bills the insurance company for the prescription like he would for anybody else that walked in his door, right? And he was reimbursed from one company, 22, I forget, it was less than $30 for that prescription. He got the statement from the Commonwealth of Virginia, and the Commonwealth of Virginia paid well over $100 for the prescription. That was a line item on the budget, so I want each and every one of you to think about that. Somewhere in the middleman, over $90 was taken, and it had nothing to do with his foot, his prescription, and that kind of thing. That's the kind of thing that's going on within the existing Medicaid system too. And that's the kind of thing we can correct and get these dollars focused back on healthcare and not on middle people and not on people doing it. Now, he put legislation in this year to try to fix it. And who do you suspect? All the middlemen came in massively lobbying against it. We're not done with that. You give me the honor and privilege of serving as your governor. I'm going to tell you something right now. We're going after them. We're going to fix this system. And there's way too much paperwork and way too much overhead and way too much middlemen in the healthcare picture that have interjected themselves into the healthcare system, have nothing to do with doctors seeing you and me and making sure that our healthcare needs are fixed. So, anyway.
Okay. Now, who has any questions? And then Aaron and Ken, if you all want to chime back in, just let me know. But anybody have any questions for the senator? If we got this room of entrepreneurs. Okay. State your name and.
It's very hard because the lights are so bright. I can't see, so I like that. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Michael Artson. I'm with the Prince William NAACP.
Yeah, Mike.
Any ideas for getting parents more involved in the education of their children? I know with the NAACP, we try to get forums to teach parents about how to get the best out of the school system. And the problem is that a lot of the parents that need the help just don't show up. And so we're looking for ways to try to get them out and more active. Anything that you've seen in the state where they've been successful in terms of getting parents who are unaffiliated, they aren't tied to a church or fraternity or sorority, and they normally just don't show up even to events like this?
Wow. It's a great question. Let me just say this, that the student's only in the classroom for 6 hours a day. And he's with his family. The remainder of that day, the student's not in the classroom during the summer. He's with his family during the summer. All the vacations, Easter vacation, he's with his family. He's not in the school. We have to get parents more involved in the education. They're an equal co-partner. How we get that message through, we can't, given the circumstances of both parents having to work, given the circumstances of single parent families, it's very difficult to insist, and I would never be the one to insist that a parent has to be there for that, but I hear that from teachers all the time. You know, we have a teacher meeting and they don't come. We have open house and the parents don't show up. How do you get out and do that? Obviously, I think the churches have a role. It's a whole community, needs to instill the importance of doing those kinds of things, to be able to get actively involved in your child's education. And maybe, in a lot of circumstances, the parent may or may not have the skill sets available to be able to pass along knowledge to their children, particularly if they get up in the upper grades and more complex coursework. Recognizing that and having a door open where there's a role to play, I believe, to ensure those resources are available if the parent doesn't feel adequate to doing the job. Early intervention has always been a key part of that. Is is kids are coming in kindergarten, first grade, not prepared to be in kindergarten, first grade. So, I mean, we've done some good work with Head Start in some of our early programs, but early childhood education is available for those parents that are working or not there with their kids, that, you know, turning daycare from more warehousing to starting the education opportunity to start to, you know, just teach some of the basic letters, words, colors, numbers, you know, some of the basic tools that any child's going to need to be able to proceed ahead with their education and do those kinds of things. But, you know, I think perhaps it's more of an education to the parents of the role, the important role they play. I'm sure all parents love their children. And I think perhaps we ought to start with that. All parents love their children. I'm not going to say all, there's always those exceptions, but for the most part, parents love their children and they want to do what's best for their children. And at points where either the faith-based community or government interfaces with that parent, the importance of saying, if you love your child, these are things you should be doing. And if you love your child, and for whatever reason you can't, I'm sure there's something there, a safety net to be able to say, and here's where you can turn to do that. And making sure that the faith-based community and you know, the community organizers, those but all have a role to play, I think, in educating that parent, because I'm quite certain that the parent loves that child. And wants to do what's best for that child and wants that child to do better than they have done. And every walk of life I see, regardless of your stature in life, I haven't met a parent yet that doesn't want their child to do better than they did. And I think that's an important part.
I want to follow up on that question. That's a very good question, sir.
If you were here, thank you. If you were here today and it was held by the teachers union, every seat in this building would be filled. If it was the administration for public schools, every single seat would be filled. They have a direct tie to the child that the parent doesn't have. And so I want to ask you, why doesn't the Commonwealth tie education funding directly to the student rather to those entities that have first claim? Going on reference to your comments regarding healthcare, those who come into the play in the area of administration, teaching, and things of that nature. Why not the child first in this regard?
Absolutely, and that, you know, the voucher programs I've supported, the school choice programs that I've supported, the children's programs that I've supported, those are all key elements to getting competition back in schools.
Yeah.
And we know competition works. Competition works on the athletic field.
Yeah.
Competition works in the business arena. And competition, we know, is the system that works. And, you know, these higher education, these colleges compete. You know, they compete obviously on the athletic field, but they live and breathe and die by U.S. News and World Report's #1 college. Trust me, they are competing. Where we don't have competition so much as in the public schools.
Yes.
And having that opportunity to do that, and having the opportunity for that parent to say, here's the cost of the education. Is there some place better that you think would better be able to serve that your child? Here it is. Now, you're physically not going to give them a check, but you know, you physically say, here's a program, you can go use that in other schools. Now, to a certain, we are addressing some of those concerns, and it's an area near and dear to my heart, is those with learning disabilities and the ability to make sure that those with learning disabilities can achieve to the highest extent that they're capable of doing. And it hits very, very close to home with me because my youngest daughter falls in that category, and now she works full time. She's 40-hour week, and she does dishes and cleans off tables and works in the galley at the amphibious base down in Little Creek, Virginia. And she's achieved what she's capable of achieving, but she did it through education and doing that. And so I think it's important that we understand those kind of things, and certainly competition works, and that's one of the areas of the public education system that we've gotten away from competition.
Okay, we have one more question, and then one more question, and then, oh,
State your name.
Yes, my name is E.J. Scott. I am interested in knowing your position. Well, I have two questions, I guess. The unilateral action that was taken recently in bombing Syria, where do you stand on that? Additionally, your votes in the Senate to support, I hate to say voter fraud legislation that would adversely impact people of color.
Well, let me first of all address the bombing in Syria. Are you talking Afghanistan, the big bomb, or help me out? Which?
Just recently that your president,
The 59 Tomahawks into Syria. Look, I think all of us were taken aghast by using sarin gas to destroy villagers and innocent lives, babies, little children, that type of thing. I absolutely believe it deserved a response, and I believe that was the appropriate response. We knew it was sarin gas. We know, and believe me, the electronics covers that entire region. We know every plane that takes off, every plane that lands, where it comes from, and where it went to. So there is no doubt in my mind that we knew exactly that these planes, loaded with sarin gas, took off from that airport, went over to that village, dropped the sarin gas, and flew back to that airport. We have enough extensive, just like FAA knows where every plane is in the sky over this country, it's the same everywhere. And especially in a hot area like that where you have military aircraft flying. So my degree of certainty that that's where the sarin gas came from is 100%. And so what is the appropriate response? I think absolutely it's appropriate to go back to where it came from and make sure it doesn't come back again from that particular base. I think it was a very measured response. I think it was a very appropriate response, and I certainly think it sends a signal that the use of weapons of mass destruction by anyone, in any country, for any reason, is unacceptable. And it will get a response if you
without
do
asking Congress,
The President has that authority under the War Powers Act to act in that limited nature at any time. As President Obama has reacted several times to situations that occurred without that. He did notify Congress as required by the War Powers Act, as did President Obama notify Congress on many, many occasions when he used the armed forces under the War Powers Act. So what he did was perfectly legal and legitimate. Your second question, I would assume by voter ID we're talking about photo ID. We require a photo ID to buy cigarettes. We require a photo ID to buy alcohol. We require a photo ID to even get on an airplane. Now, I think to protect, to ensure that those that are legitimately registered to vote, to ask them to bring a photo ID to vote is of the same level as I would say to get on an airplane. And I've never heard anyone complain ever that somehow this is airplane rider suppression because you're making me provide a photo ID to get on an airplane. No more than I can consider voter suppression to think that you have to have a photo ID to vote. Even having said that, we make provisions in the law, if you don't have your photo ID, to make a provisional ballot. So you can still vote. It goes in a provisional box, and then you have to come back and I am who I said I was. So no one is restricted from voting. The provisional ballot is in place. It's part of the law that we passed, and I don't find that voter suppression whatsoever. But I do think we have a responsibility to protect those that are vote and their integrity of their vote by ensuring that someone who may not even be a citizen of the United States votes and negates the votes of an American citizen. And I find that just as reprehensible that opportunity would be there and available to somehow negate your vote, or your vote by someone that is legally not allowed to vote.
We have another question, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Gary. Well, first, I do not agree with you on the evidence because it's not conclusive. So I'm not going to agree with you on that. But the question that I have is, as it relates to Virginia, do you think Virginia is a competitive the state? And if it's not, what would you do to make it competitive or more competitive?
Well, I've talked quite a bit about it, I think, at length in terms of our competitiveness. We're in competition in a global economy, but we're in competition with 49 other states in terms of economic development activity. I look to states that are growing faster than Virginia and say, what are they doing that we're not doing? And what should we be doing that they are doing? And that's where I come to many of my conclusions about the viable transportation network. I mean, ask yourself this question, and this is what confirms my conclusions on transportation so much. If you go to Winston-Salem and Greensboro, there's literally 30, 40 miles from Danville, Martinsville, Virginia. Their economy's on fire. They're growing. There's plenty of work around, and they're bringing people. Cross the border into Virginia, just 30 miles away, and it looks like a depression. It looks like depression near our economy, Martinsville. It looks like a depression. What's the difference? Well, one of them has an interstate highway system and broadband access, and one of them doesn't. So, as a businessman, you have to make an investment. One of the earlier questions was, how do I get access to capital? Where do I get that money to make that investment? How do I make that investment? And you expect a return on an investment. A businessman or a woman borrows that money, can buy a business, in expectation of not only paying the loan off, but being better off for having gone through that. I think when you look at transportation, you're going to make an investment in transportation with the expectation that the citizens are going to be better off due to expanded economic activities. So that answers one of your questions. And I think I went through the tax rates, comparable tax rates between our bordering states and what we pay here in Virginia, and the fact that they are doing better than us. That's certainly one of those. There's multiple parts to what I would call economic development. One of them is to try to bring one in. But probably the two that are the most viable are small businesses provide statistically over and over again 50% of the job gains in any region. So I think expanding the opportunities for small business, the access to capital, bringing everybody in under that arena of expanding small business will be a big part of it. The one-stop shopping, the ease of applications, the being able to go in and find out all the programs that are in place, and there are many, many programs available. I wish I brought it with me. I actually have a 20-page sheet of economic development initiatives that the state operates right now that, I wish I could take off, but there's that many that I have, even I can't recall all those programs that are there. Small business, and then the next best place to do it is expanding existing businesses that are around. And that's the easiest. The people, the infrastructure is already in place, the company is already here. What can we do to help you grow your business? And I'm not aware of anyone at the state level that's going around now to visit Virginia businesses saying, what can we do to help you expand? What's keeping you back from expanding your business and opening up more job opportunities? And third and foremost is what I said earlier. I've done that survey already, and what I've heard overwhelmingly from every other business is I can't find qualified people to fill the roles where I could expand right now today. And so closing that loop. And that's not just, I focused on kind of the children that are in the education process, 6 through 12, but there's a lot of folks out there that lost a job. It could be a disruptor, some technology came along and made the job go away. It could be the company moved. It could be the company went bankrupt. All of those folks that are in there need that opportunity to just as much as that 6th through 12th grader to regain those technical skills, and we need to open up the opportunities to expand that with what the community college is doing. And I'll tell you one more thing, and I think the private sector wants to be a part of the equation. The people I talk to, some of them have gone out on their own and started their own programs, but they very much would like to partner with government to start to turn out the students, because it's critical to keep their businesses open, that we have those opportunities. So I hope that answers your question. I have a hard time. If you sat where I sat, all I see is bright lights. So I can't see your expression or anything. So.
Yes, we have one final question.
Getting her and the guy behind you,
Oh, you don't care? Yeah, the senator's gonna be around for a few minutes after we end, but get your question.
Good afternoon, I'm Brenda Alford, and I'd like to thank you very much for coming. And I'd also like to thank your staff person because she highlighted some things in your material that I didn't know about you before you came today. And I'd like to thank both of you for enlightening me on that. I'd like to go back to career and vocational education. I think that's something that's really declining in our society today. You mentioned earlier that they had shop classes when you were in high school, and they also had those when I was in high school. But I see that on the decline, and I really think that something needs to be done, because I think these are the kinds of opportunities for young people to get involved in. And I see them coming apprentices, they can join unions, and they can also become business owners. So I think that's an area that we really need to improve on in our school systems. When I visit some of the schools for different career days and other activities, they're staffed pretty much like they were 30, 40 years ago when I was in high school. They still have one counselor for 400 or 500 students. That ratio means that they're not getting very much information from that individual. I see very little other opportunities such as social workers and psychologists. Kids today have a lot more issues to face than I ever had, but their schools are less able to deal with that. So one of the things I'd like for you to focus on is getting us back where we were when you and I were in school, so that we have vocational and career opportunities expanded rather than declining over the last 30 or 40 years, because these are the areas that individuals need to be involved in. A few weeks ago, the plumber came by my house who works for another company, and he charged me probably more that morning on his way to work than I probably made all day, and I have 2 degrees and 30-some years of experience. So these are the kinds of fields that people need to be in, because these are money-making, they're gonna get a job, but more than a job, they're gonna be focused toward a career. They're gonna go from one step to the other. And I think that that's what our school system needs to be emphasizing. And we as business owners or whatever professions we in, we need to reach back to these schools and try to help individuals understand what it takes to make it in a career today, because it is different. They have more technology than ever, but some of the ones I talked to know more about a career than I did when I was in school. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, no, I mean, and I appreciate it. Let me tell you how that, for those that are professional educators within the public school system, when we say SOLs and SOQs, everybody's going to make sure that the pass rate is such that there's...
Explain to them what those are, SOL.
Okay, all right, let me explain that, okay. Standards of quality are standards that the state sets that says that every public education system must meet these standards of quality. And it gets down to how many guidance counselors. It gets down to, it's fairly specific. It's a regulatory program that's established. We set the big bullet points in Code of Virginia. The regulatories comes up with exactly what defines a quality education in Virginia. And then because we were concerned that so many students were graduating, but some were in fact illiterate. I mean, how did you get all the way through school and not be able to do basic math or be able to read? How did you graduate with a diploma? That led to something called the Standards of Learning, which was a series of tests that said, okay, you must have a pass rate. You have to pass this test in order to tick off as SOLs. What that led to was the accreditation of schools and the accreditation of school systems by saying you must have X percentage of your students pass at this school in order to be accredited as a fully accredited school. And then obviously as a school system wide, to be a fully accredited school system, you must have this type of pass rate. So it was a way to measure school performance. And when you look at the SOLs, while some are basic in reading and things, skill sets that you're going to need regardless of where you go down and what career path you do, a lot of these were more geared towards going to college at the expense of career technical education. So what we need to do is go back in and say, okay, we'll keep that system, but we're going to have one in career technical. So the school system can say, well, I can get accreditation with this path or both paths, which is what it'll be, both paths. So I'm not declining an education in either direction a student wants to go. Once you do that, once you set up this accreditation path in the career technical field, you watch what happens in the school systems. Because the school systems want full accreditation, and the individual schools want full accreditation. And now all of a sudden, teachers are going to start looking and saying, wow, and students are going to start looking at that. But I will tell you, I mean, although it was a while since I was in Washington Lee, and I think every one of you, think back to your public school days. There were friends of yours every day that no more wanted to do coursework that led to college than a man on the moon. Had no fathoming what to do that. But we had an opportunity for them then to pursue a direction that they did want to do. Now we shut that opportunity down, but those students are still there. Those kids are still there. We have a function to educate our children, and we've dropped the ball. And maybe I'm a little bit of a unique Republican to point it out, but you know what? I think it's that important that I'm putting myself out on a limb and doing this. Believe me, 4 hours up here, and my driver can confirm to you, I beat myself in the head. What am I doing on the day before Easter on a beautiful day, coming up here? But I'm coming up here to talk to you all about issues that I feel are very important. If we do not make this investment in transportation, think about it. Think about where you are today. And believe me when I tell you what I told you about the situation and funding in Northern Virginia, but all over the Commonwealth. If we don't go to, and who's willing to go out and talk to them? Talk to the people honestly about what the problems are here and what the fix is for it. And that's why I'm here today, because I feel strongly about these issues. I mean, we can pick and do these things, but that's not me. I don't want to come back to Washington, D.C. and be a bigger shot. I have no inkling. I grew up here and I live in Virginia Beach, not because I dislike Washington, D.C., but because what I like to do is work around people who work with their hands, okay, and do things. And there's a tremendous amount of satisfaction to see a vessel come in beat up, not working, one of the rudders not working, the propeller jammed, and go to work on that thing and return a boat ready to run, and off it goes. It gives me a great deal of satisfaction, and working around those folks day in and day out, regardless of skin color, that's not even an object. Now I will tell you something. The other thing is, the Republicans, and quite frankly, Ralph Northam and I are the only two that served in the armed forces. The only two. For whatever reason, none of the rest of the candidates wanted to serve in the armed forces. And that's okay, that's their own personal decision. But one of the things, the leader in breaking down barriers and races, the leader in so many areas has always been the armed forces. Now they might have been dragged into it by Congress, I got it, but it's a fully integrated force. Nobody cares what anybody's skin color is. Nobody could care less. It's can you get the job done? That's all we care about, and anybody who wasn't part of the solution, I had a senior chief that made sure they were part of the solution, or we took care of the problem, and it really wasn't that, and the old cliche quote, there's in a foxhole, there's no barriers at your buddy, and you rely on each other to get the mission done. And that's key. And so the mission here in Virginia is what are the problems? And you go around and you listen to them and you hear what the problems are. You say, okay, I'm drawing on 25 years of experience in the General Assembly. I'm drawing on 35, 40 years of experience in the business community. I'm drawing on 9 years of military experience. I'm drawing on these personal life experiences of what I know to come to you all today and say, this is what I think we need to do to make Virginia a better place for each and every one of us. And that's why I'm here today, and judging by the traffic, I hope to be home before the sun goes down. But again, look, it's a great question. That was almost a closing statement, but I really can't add anything more to what I just said right there. That's why I'm here today. Know my motivation, know my heart. I'm 61 years old. If you give me the honor and privilege of being your governor, be 62, be 66 when I retire. I look back and I draw from experience in my first ship. When I got to my first ship down in Little Creek, I was the operations officer, like I told you earlier, and I got on there. I'm an ensign. I don't know anything. And 2 years later, I was the navigator. I was the operator. I knew everything. I told the captain where we had to go, when we had to be there, what it is we had to do. That's what operations officers do. I was the senior watch officer, which meant I set the watch bill for everybody on the ship. Who had to stand engineering watches? Who had to stand navigation watches? Who had to stand bridge watches? Who had to stand all this? I did it all. I ran that ship. And I walked off that ship when I finally got off, and I said, that ship will never sail. I just walked off it. It's impossible for that ship to go anywhere. I hadn't gotten to the gate of Little Creek before the brow was up and the ship was gone. And it was a very humbling experience when you think you're that much of a hot shot, that the ship can't run without you, and you didn't get to the gate and the ship's gone. But I look back and I can say, you know what, for me having been on that ship, I left it a little better off from me having been there. And if I can look back at my time in public service and say, you know, I left Virginia a little better off from me having been there, I will consider it a very, very successful career. And I will tell you one more thing, I will close. This dialogue that we're having today, although we're not going to agree on every issue, I understand, you know, I'm married. There's a lot of issues we don't agree on, okay? And she wins, but you know, there's a lot of we don't agree on, you know. But the dialogue has to keep up. I cannot know what your problems are because I don't walk in your shoes. So if you don't tell me what your problems are and some of your thoughts of solution, and if we work together, we can work these solutions out. So you have this promise from me, even if you don't agree with me today, the door will be open. I'll be there with that, and let's continue the dialogue we had today. That's why it was so important for me to gut it up on the highway. And I can tell you, my driver will tell you, about 5 times I said, turn around. But in my mind, I kept saying, no, there's going to be people in that audience that were counting on seeing me, not him. They're counting on seeing me, and I'm not going to let them down. I'm going to gut it out and be here. So, again, you all have a wonderful Easter holiday. Thank you all so much.
I thank the Senator again for dealing with all this traffic here in Northern Virginia. And what we're going to do, we're going to close out the program, but also mark on your calendars Wednesday, May 10th, in this auditorium, we're going to be hosting the Lieutenant Governor candidates on the Republican side here to do a symbol. We've already had 2 of the 3 candidates confirmed so far. So I want you all to join us Wednesday night where we can, May 10th, where we can have another dialogue with another group of Republicans. And thank you all for coming out. And I don't know where, Lateef, you want to snap some pictures of this. And Aaron and Kim, we're going to take some pictures with the senator. And for you all in the audience, after we do the group photo here, I want you all to come up stage and take some pictures and talk to the senator if you all have some comments that you didn't want to ask publicly. But as you can see, he's very engaged. Okay. And so thank you again for coming. We'll see you Wednesday, May 10th, and you all have a great Easter.
But the parents don't even know about it. Start telling them.
Okay, you want to do interview for
I have a card in the car.
Anybody else want to get the picture?
They weren't talking, I was talking. Get right out
From one position to the next. Because, you know, a 65-year-old guy working outside. That's something. Things so that the kids know how to do their
I'll take it the way it is. It works. Oh, okay.
It's a good tool.
Yeah.